Well, it seems our last video on this topic wasn't enough to contain all the different examples that are out there, so we had to do a sequel. With the wrestling world bleeding back over into the mainstream more and more every day, this could end up being a regular thing in the future, and we may end up having to do a whole series on these, so be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell, because today we're going to look at 10 more wrestlers who've appeared in other video games. Number 1. Macho Man Randy Savage, Cars RACE-O-RAMA. This 2009 multi-platform game was released as a tie-in to Pixar's Cars universe and is itself a sequel to 2007's Cars Master National Championship. What's more relevant for wrestling fans here is that nestled alongside the expected cast of characters is El Machismo, voiced by none other than WWE Hall of Famer Macho Man Randy Savage himself. Savage's husky tones are unmistakable, and his larger-than-life persona lends itself perfectly to the game. He plays a rival Carter series protagonist Lightning McQueen, who eventually turns face and becomes friends with him by the end. Oops, sorry for spoiling the game. This was one of the former WWE and WCW champions' final public roles before his untimely and sadly ironic death in a car crash in 2011, but it gave him a new lease of life before he went with a whole new generation of fans. Number 2. Samoa Joe, Telltale Game of Thrones and Dota 2. Anyone who's seen Samoa Joe's appearance on Xavier Woods' Up Up Down Down YouTube channel already knows that he's a gaming enthusiast, but what you may not know is that he's appeared in more than one video game series himself. He made his first appearance in the Call of Blade Form Legacy expansion to Valve's hugely successful 2013 MOBA game Dota 2. A noted fan of the franchise, Joe must have been giddy to get the chance to appear in it as the voice of Juggernaut Arcana, but he wasn't done there because only a year later, he provided further voice acting to Telltale Games' Game of Thrones adaptation. The company had gained notoriety for their acclaimed Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us games, so expectations were high for what they would do with the fantasy epic. While this game received mixed reviews upon release, at least Samoa Joe got a chance to make an appearance as the Beast. Now we're just left wondering where he'll show up next. Number 3. Baron Corbin, Madden NFL 12. Yes, Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar aren't the only former American football players to make an appearance in a John Madden game before hitting it big in the wrestling world. There are countless other examples we can list here, but we're going to focus on one, that being one of the top heels in WWE television and Reigns' current enemy, King Baron Corbin. Corbin appeared in the 2012 edition of the massively popular franchise under his real name Thomas Pestock. Unfortunately, this would be Corbin's only appearance in the franchise as his American football career would come to an end soon after, being released by the Arizona Cardinals in September of 2011. Luckily, he would bounce back with the WWE, and whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny that he's one of the company's top stars right now. Number 4. Kazuchika Okada, Tetsuya Naito, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Hiroyoshi Tenzan, Satoshi Kojima, and Toru Yano, Yakuza 6. Moving away from WWE wrestlers for a moment now, the Yakuza series has been a huge success in its native Japan for years now, and recently crossed over to the West in a big way with the release of its 5th main series entry a few years previous to this. For its sequel, the game's developers decided to include wrestlers from New Japan Pro Wrestling. Okada, Naito, Tanahashi, Tenzan, Kojima and Yano all appear as members of the street gang Justice, antagonists to your character in one of the game's side stories. As this roughly coincided with New Japan's Western expansion, it may have been a surprise for many Western players to see some of their new favourite wrestlers suddenly pop up, and it probably didn't hurt the game's sales on this side of the world either. Number 5. Bobby Lashley, EA Sports MMA. EA Sports MMA, released for PS3 and Xbox 360 in 2010, featured some of the best fighters of the day that weren't under contract with the UFC due to them having a rival game released the previous year. Instead, MMA organization Strikeforce became the main company featured, and this one included one of their at the time top prospects, Bobby Lashley. Lashley had been following the footsteps of Brock Lesnar and was making a name for himself in the MMA world. This game appearance serving as one of his career high points. The game itself was less successful, and 3 years later, EA would drop the series to pick up the rights to the UFC franchise. Lashley would continue to have a successful MMA career and would eventually return to the WWE in 2018 for, well, let's call it a less than stellar run. Number 6. John Cena, Becky Lynch, The Rock, Xavier Woods, Macho Man Randy Savage, Asuka, The Undertaker and Roman Reigns, BRAWLHALLA. BRAWLHALLA is a free-to-play fighting game that was released by Ubisoft in 2017 and has been compared to the likes of industry behemoth Super Smash Bros., even having its own competitive championships that are held annually for its most avid players, with this year's winner being offered a $100,000 prize. One of the game's many roster updates was a tie-in promoting 2019 SummerSlam, letting players fight as John Cena, Becky Lynch, The Rock or Xavier Woods. A later patch would also see Randy Savage, Asuka, The Undertaker and Roman Reigns included too as purchasable characters. Outside of an officially licensed WWE title, we think this might be the most wrestlers to appear at one time in one game and almost warrants it being an official WWE title in its own right. As we said, this one is free to play and a hell of a lot of fun, so check it out if you haven't already. Number 7. ATSUSHI ONITA, Anytime Anywhere Politics Quiz. Here's a slightly more obscure one for you all. ONITA isn't very known in the West, but in Japan he is iconic for innovating the deathmatch wrestling genre, creating much of the style as it's known today. For anyone who hasn't seen any of his work, go back and watch his exploding no-rope barbed wire exploding ring time bomb deathmatch with Terry Funk. Yes, that is the full title of the match. It sounds preposterous, but it's seriously one of the most emotional matches we've ever seen. After making a career out of taking part in bouts like this, ONITA retired and moved into the world of politics, where he was elected to Japan's House of Councillors. It was this change in his career that would lead him to lending his name to the game Anytime Anywhere Politics Quiz for Nintendo DS in 2007. As far as we know, this one wasn't available outside of Japan, but due to its focus on Japanese politics, it probably wouldn't have been worthwhile translating it for the West. All we can say is that it's one of the strangest career left turns, going from wrestling to politics to gaming. Number 8. Rosa Mendez, Need for Speed Most Wanted. The Need for Speed series has certainly had its ups and downs over the years, but this 2012 entry was one of the better reviewed and had a surprising Easter egg for wrestling fans in the form of an appearance from Rosa Mendez. This appearance served as another feather in her cap as she appeared as one of the game's main villains, Isabel Diaz, lending her voice and her likeness to the character. Since this appearance, Rosa has given birth and even returned to the independent wrestling circuit, showing that despite her limited skills in the ring, she has no quid in her when it comes to keeping herself out there. Number 9. Xavier Woods, Super Bomberman R. Bomberman is a legend in gaming circles, so it's surprising that this was the first main series entry in over a decade. Wrestling's most famous gaming enthusiast Xavier Woods must have been biding his time because he made sure to get himself included in it upon release. His playable character sprite was part of a day one patch and shows him sporting his traditional colourful New Day garb, not to mention his trombone, while being aptly named Xavier Woods Bomber. Woods' special abilities included being able to shield himself with a wrestling ring, and he himself tweeted out his glee at being included in one of his favourite franchises after his character went live. We can only imagine the hours he must have lost playing as himself afterwards. And number 10, CM Punk, UFC 2 and 3. Look in his eyes, what do you see? Well, a lot of controversy. CM Punk's move into the MMA world was always going to gather a lot of press, and it quickly became clear that for as admirable as his attempt was, his skills weren't on the same level as his opponents. He made his first appearance in the second edition of the UFC video game series before he had even had his first fight, and this caused some heated discussion amongst fans given that he was ranked 85 out of 100, an admittedly high rating for someone who at the time had a 0-0 record and has since gone on to lose both fights he was involved in. This would eventually be downgraded to 82 before the game's release, and Punk responded to those angry fans in a tweet where he called them butthurt. This didn't stop him being included in next year's installment either. Will 2020 be the year he returns to the 2K franchise now that his MMA career appears to be over? We can only speculate that in the comments down below. But there you have it guys, 10 more wrestlers who have appeared in other video game series. Be sure to leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling video game content.